get ready to call the Finance Committee to order. All members of the committee, Alderwoman Finlayson and Alderman Payon, are present. First order of business is to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the agenda as written.
I'll second that.
All those in favor of the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Next item is approval of the minutes for our last meeting, our September 1st meeting.
Mr. Chair, I have had occasion to review the minutes. They appear to be accurate. I'd move their approval.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. So we have one item on our agenda, and it's a big and important one, which is one legislative item, which is the discussion of 3121 issuance of general obligation bonds. And we have our finance director here. This has actually got more nuances to it than usual because there's some refunding, but I think it looks pretty good from our presentation at the Financial Advisory Commission.
So the ordinance that you want me to go ahead? Okay. The ordinance that you're looking at is the bond ordinance, and that simply gives the administration the authority to borrow. And it provides a list of all of the capital projects that are currently in process and how much total bonds we would need, maximum amount of bonds we would need to sell or borrow for in order to complete them. And that schedule is attached to the bond ordinance, and we don't borrow up to the max. We borrow only what we think we're going to spend in the next 12 to 18 months. So this is the first step in the bond sale process, and the presentation that we're going to do about the refunding is an offshoot of this ordinance. We have the authority to refund per the bond ordinance, and we have decided, based on advice from our financial advisors, that we are going to sell some new money bonds for our capital projects, and we are going to do a refunding because the interest rate environment is favorable now. So I don't know if you want to talk in detail about the ordinance itself.
There's refunding, there's also taking out some long-term bans.
So a year ago, we took out a ban in the form of a line of credit from a bank, and the upcoming bond sale is going to, they call it taking out the ban, but we really haven't borrowed anything on the ban except for the cost of financing that was done in order to get it. We have some fees that we incur when we do that. That's the only amount that we borrowed was $50,000 for that. So we haven't borrowed anything on the line of credit, but still we are turning that short-term line of credit into these long-term bonds, and we'll actually borrow and get cash and then use that for the upcoming year's capital projects.
And we're getting rid of all of our revenue bonds, and we're refunding some bonds from 2015, I believe it is, because we can get a better interest rate, and we refund when we can improve our position by 3% or more. That would be a good table if you could bring it up, Madam Chair.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question before we go on? Could you explain what refunding means?
Refunding is when you issue new bonds and pay off old bonds. Okay. And you do that in an environment where the current interest rate to borrow is better than the interest rate that's on the old bonds, just like refinancing your mortgage. And you get that lower interest rate, and you program the payments over the life of the existing bonds, not the new bonds will go over a shorter life. They will be stretched out over the life of the bonds that you're paying off. So you're not carrying the debt any longer because of it. But the interest rate environment makes it such that you will save money for the city in the form of interest expense. over time.
And the new bonds have a shorter term than the old bonds?
Yes, you don't carry those new bonds out any further than the existing bonds that they're refunding.
Okay,
So that's the same term.
yeah. Okay, and are you going to explain the attachments, or, because I had a question about the first, I think it's the first attachment, which 2 pages of all of the projects.
Correct. That is the first exhibit attached to the ordinance, and that shows you all of the capital projects that are currently in our CIP, and it tells you what their funding sources are, and it says, it'll tell you how many bonds have been programmed, how many bonds we have used to date, and how many bonds are remaining to be used. And that last number, the amount of bonds remaining to be used, is what, if you total that exhibit down at the bottom, comes to a total for all projects. And then we show at the bottom, we reduce that amount by the amount of bond proceeds that we currently have still in accounts to use.
And stop me if I'm interrupting your presentation. If you're going to get to this, I can wait until you get to it. But I'm looking now at page 2, which I assume is the bottom line.
Yes, if you look down at the bottom right, you'll have to tell me what that number is, because I don't have the exhibit in front of me. Hold on. Let me draw it up from the site.
It appears that the bottom line is you're requesting the authority for 36.3?
I'm going to open it up so I'll make sure that I'm telling you. It'll be the number at the bottom right.
36.4 million.
36.358, that's what, yeah.
786.
I'm going to,
768.
I guess my other question is, if that's a yes, we got a ban last year, and we have not used it at all.
correct?
And what we're paying on that is the interest for the potential use.
So we pay the interest on what we've borrowed, and we didn't draw, it's a line of credit, and we only drew down the 50,000. So we've been paying a small amount of interest monthly on that amount. But the construction projects didn't move very far this last year. And we also had some bond proceeds in an account still from an old issue. So whatever progress has been made on these projects this last year, we have been using the old proceeds first. So we have not had to use that line of credit for capital projects yet.
Okay, that explains why.
And let me, I got the exhibit pulled up here, so. Yes, 36,358,768 is the maximum amount of authority that the council will be providing for these new projects. In addition, we get authority to refund the existing bond issues. That's on Exhibit 2. If you look at the second exhibit, there's a list of the existing bonds that we're asking for authority to refund, but only at a certain percent. I think it's like 20%. We wouldn't refund any more than 20% at a time.
Okay, now I'm not clear.
Okay, so
I'm on Exhibit 2.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm on Exhibit 2.
Yes, that is a list of all the currently outstanding bonds, GO bonds, that the city currently holds,
Okay.
as of June 30.
Okay, so that doesn't relate back to the 36 million. I thought you
No,
said.
it is not. 36 million is the amount of unused bonds we currently have on the active capital projects. That's what we call new money. When we borrow and we say we're borrowing new money, it's the money to address the current projects. When you talk about refunding, you're actually paying off old bonds, projects that we've already built.
Thank you. I thought you said that one was connected to the other. So I
So the
misunderstood.
ordinance gives the administration authority to borrow for both purposes.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so I'm clear, what is the criteria for refunding a bond? Are you looking at the projects where the principal of the bond is intact? In other words, you know, that principal amount is, what is it, held in escrow, or how does that work? I mean, what?
So if you're looking for how we decide to refund,
Yeah.
the financial advisors analyze the debt service requirements of the existing issue over time, and they lay out what the new refunding bonds would be, what their interest and principal payout would be over time. Then they take the present value of that payout, and they compare the present values of those two outgoing cash flows. And if they get a 3% difference in those two cash flows, net present value, they will say, okay, we have a refunding opportunity here. And it has to be at least 3%, because every time you sell bonds like this, you have a lot of expenses that go along with it. And you want to make sure that your transaction is going to net you some savings, substantial savings, after you pay all those expenses.
We've never
So-
done it, we've never had a consequence of having a negative,
No,
oh, yeah,
no, we would only undertake a refunding if it's going to save.
right.
And so the proposal that we can go through in a minute is offering to refund both GO bonds, which are being paid by the general fund, and some being paid by, parking, transportation, those kind of funds. And then it's proposing to refund the revenue bonds that the city sold in 2015. One was a new money issue and one was a refunding. And it's a substantial amount of bonds outstanding, and the interest rate environment is more favorable than it was then. That's really going to have a substantial amount of savings, and those savings will be seen in the water and sewer funds.
And the tables that I was asking that you show from Mason, from our bond counsel, show with each one of these the amount of savings. One of them, I think, was over 14% differential. So it's huge. It's also, they're such a good group of people. They make it very clear. And I hope everybody can open the materials from them. But can you go to the tables, Jody, that showed each of the things where we're over 3%?
So,
Jody, is that, Ms. Dickinson, is that what you sent us?
Yep.
In an attachment on our,
Yep.
as an email?
yes.
Right.
Okay.
So
this
the
explains-
tables start to appear on page 4. Actually, on the presentation numbers, it's page 3. So the bullets that were in the front of the presentation kind of outlined which issues they're proposing to refund. And the first issue that they've proposed is some of these 2012 bonds. And if you see here is this table where they've done the debt service comparison. Here's the debt service that we're currently paying, and here's the refunding debt service. And here's the net present value budgetary savings that we're getting because of those differences. So we're going to save $337, this is not present value, this is straight value, and up here they've got the present value up here.
Right.
Here's the 337 of the savings, and at a present value is $328,000, and that's 5.9% savings.
And the gauge is that number needs to be above 3% to make it worth doing. So when we go through these tables, you'll see all of them. This one is almost 6%, so that's twice the reason, the criteria for making this change. And as I said, we flipped through some of these other tables, and you look at that upper left-hand corner there, the value of savings, you're going to see some of them are really big, in 14% range. So the other thing that was presented to the fact that Jody has, the finance director Dickinson has presented to us over time, is the revenue bonds come with a lot of administrative efforts that are attached to them. When we were considering revenue bonds all these years ago, there was the thought that there was potentially going to be an interest rate differential between revenue bonds and general obligation bonds. That never panned out. And so when you look at the fact that the interest rate is the same and the administrative burden of doing the revenue bonds, it makes sense to get rid of the revenue bonds. There is a difference in our overall debt load between how we account for general obligation and revenue bonds, but the debt service is the same. And one of the things that I think is important on these tables as you go through is you're going to see we're front loading the savings, because remember in 23, 24, and 25, we're bumping up against our debt service boundary, that 12% boundary. And so by doing this and front loading it, we're pulling ourselves back away from that 12% debt service as a percent of the general fund. So if you could show us just a couple of other tables. Suffice it to
Go through her presentation?
I'm doing this at Alderman Arnett's request, and I will go wherever you need to go. I'm not making a formal presentation, but I'm going to flip through these one at a time. I think we've covered this slide. He just pointed out that these are the years in which the savings are occurring, and most of the savings on this one occur in the first 3 years. So here's the second one. This issue is 2013 bonds. And in the 2013 bond sale, we have refunding opportunities. Again, the savings are $466,000, which you see here, but the present value of that amount is $370,000. That's 6% of savings, 6.18%.
How much did you say the savings is?
Dollar-wise,
Yeah.
present value $370,000 for this issue. And the one
you.
before was a similar number. The one before had
I've got it.
$328,000. And as you see, the savings on this one will be up front in the next 3 years. We'll see this much in savings.
Are you on the 13 bonds?
Yep.
13?
Yep. I've been scrolling up and down, so I might have lost you.
So, I'm sorry. So on the 2013 bonds, the savings is 466.
That's cash savings, but when you
Cash
present
savings.
value that flow, it's $370,000.
the upper left hand, right by the percentage.
Up here, okay.
Yeah, the upper left, there's a summary.
Okay.
That's the easiest place to look. And down below, the tables are showing you that savings over time. All right, so the next one, we have some opportunity on this 2015 AGO bonds. These are not the revenue bonds yet. That's in a different section. So if you look here, again, we have $323,000, $323,905 right there for this issue. And then again, the savings are in the first 3 years. Most of the savings are in the first 3 years. So then they go on to talk about the water and sewer revenue bonds. In 2015, the administration chose to issue revenue bonds instead of GO bonds. At the time, there were some market factors and factors here at the city that made this a better option for the city. And what happens with the revenue bonds is everything is being handled by a trust. And we send our revenues to the trust. As we collect utility revenues, we send them to the trust. As we spend money on our operating expenses, they send us money back. That happens every month. And then we have about 12 accounts at the trustee with these funds in them, and money is shifting in and out and between the accounts on a regular basis. So that gives us entries, journal entries we have to do for all those transactions. and a waterfall process that we have to go through every month to decide how much we spent, how much we need to send them, and what the debt service reserves are. So those are some of the administrative tasks involved. So on this one, we've got the same kind of table going on here. This is where there were two issues in those revenue bonds. 2015A bonds was new money for capital improvements at that time. And if you see here, this proposed refunding is estimated to have about $450,000 of present value savings. This, although we have a good chunk of savings in the first year, we've got this one spread out over time. And they do that on purpose because this is an enterprise fund, and the ratepayers that are paying for this debt aren't going to want to have large fluctuations in the expense levels, so that the rates can be held as level as possible. The big savings is coming in this issue we did in 2015, which was a refunding issue. And when we refund these bonds, they're anticipating a present value savings of $2,359,000. That's about 14.5% savings. That's substantial, and again, that will go to the water and sewer funds. And this payout here will show you the savings over time.
Are
Again,
we still on the 15A?
No, I went on to the
Okay,
15B.
sorry.
This is the largest
reading.
issue, and this is the one with by far the most savings. And, you know, once we pay off all these existing revenue bonds, we'll be able to dissolve the trust arrangement and rid ourselves of all those administrative procedures that we do.
I just have a quick one. What is the logic in, I'm so sorry, Fred, go ahead.
For all of these all these bonds that we're refinancing, this is roughly somewhat equivalent to refinancing a mortgage on your house.
It is the same type of transaction. We're issuing new debt
okay.
to pay off old debt.
So we maybe put a couple of years longer on the, no?
No,
Okay.
when municipalities do refunding issues, the payout of the new bonds does not go any further out in the future than the current bonds that are being refunded.
Doesn't
You
seem
can
like-
do that on a mortgage transaction. You can stretch your payments out longer if you want to, but in the government bond issues, when we refund, we don't pay the new bonds over a longer period of time.
Well, there doesn't seem to be much of a downside, if any,
No,
to refinancing
no,
these, correct?
nope. The only downside is the effort that goes into it to get it to market, and
There are some costs when we're doing these reissuances, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we have costs which go into the borrowing. You know, we have to borrow a little bit extra to pay the cost involved, and there's also a lot of staff time that goes into getting it ready for selling. So
Just a quick one. Why, you might have already explained this, or Ross may have, why are we holding the negative arbitrage? What is the judgment there?
okay, so that you're going to have the financial advisors tell you that. Sometimes
fine.
you can show present value savings, but because of the interest rate situation, you can have negative arbitrage. And if it goes into the negative arbitrage, then you have to think, well, you have present value savings, but you might have an arbitrage issue, which means the money that you sit on and pay, do your capital projects with could earn more interest than you're paying. And then you have to pay an arbitrage payment to the federal government for earning more than you pay out. So they analyze their proposed payout of the old and new, and if it's going to have a negative impact on arbitrage, then they'll say you might not want to do this. We had a situation like that earlier that
It's a
we
risk
decided not to do it because of negative arbitrage.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I can tell you that Joe Mason and Jennifer Dickinson their
Dirksen.
usual good job, Dickerson, of presenting all of this material to the Financial Advisory Commission. You know they have the city's interests at heart, always have. And of course, they ask, pointed questions, but they were satisfied with these operations. And so was I, and I think that's why I was wishing that we could get all this material before you, because it lays it out pretty clearly. And as you say, Alderman Payone, it's like, why wouldn't you do this? It just seems like a very good set of financial maneuvers, and I can tell you that the FAC felt that same way in their discussion on this. I don't know do you know, Director Dickinson, if they're going to give us a letter with their findings? I didn't hear them say that, but I did hear them say that they were satisfied with what we were doing.
A letter of findings, who?
From the fact that just says that they find that these...
I think they made a formal motion and sent
that's
that to either Ms. Green or somebody in the Office of Law about agreeing to something. I don't know, but I think it might have been the bond ordinance though itself, not necessarily the refunding.
They did, and Jacqueline as well, and she requested that they send something.
In writing,
Right.
okay.
Good.
So would that be attached to the legislation?
If we-
It's not, I don't know if it is
They
right
haven't
now.
sent it yet, but once it is, once they send it, then it will
Right.
be.
And City Attorney Lyles was there as well at that meeting. The other thing that I asked for was a redo of our debt service affordability tables, because I think this actually, as I said earlier, improves our picture somewhat. And I will want to discuss some of the discussion from the fact on our bond rating, but thought we could do that in the financial update. I think at this point, it's appropriate for for someone to make a motion for a recommendation from if you're satisfied with all of the information, for the Finance Committee to make a recommendation to the City Council.
Is it, okay, this is one we make a recommendation on?
Right, because it's.
I would so move that we give O 3121 a favorable recommendation. I don't see how there's really a serious downside.
Well, if Alderman Payone makes a recommendation to approve it, then how can I not second it?
Thank you.
You're looking at somebody that's refinanced their house, I think, either 4 or 5 times, so.
So to clarify, the only thing that you need to take a motion on is the ordinance itself. The
Yes.
ordinance itself only gives us the authority to borrow and to refund. It doesn't approve this particular transaction, although this is our intent, this is how we're moving forward with that authority.
Thank you, that's an
All right.
important point.
Yeah.
But in giving a favorable recommendation to this ordinance, we are in essence endorsing.
You are endorsing the authority to borrow and to
Exactly.
refund, yes.
All right.
Okay?
So we have a motion. Is there any further discussion? All those of favor of the Finance Committee recommending favorably on ordinance 3121 signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. I find this kind of fun stuff, but I just think that our bond counsel and our finance department are evermore doing a good job for us. And I want to thank you, Director Dickinson, for all the effort that I know you and your staff go through to do this, and I know it is an effort. So once again, we appreciate you and what your people do. That is the end of our legislative agenda. I did want to bring up some discussion from the FAC meeting, which was discussing the good news about the Moody's increase in our bond rating, which we've discussed before, and I think the council has applauded the efforts of the Finance Committee. But I have been asking, and we did get from Joe Mason, the bond rating history, there were 2 points. One is the difference between a AA1 rating and a AA2 rating in terms of the interest rates we pay on our bonds were a few basis points. So it's not a big difference in the interest rate, although when you spread that over millions and millions of dollars, it does add up to real amounts of money. But the other question I was curious about is what our bond rating was back when we were taking out $10 million lines of credit and we're really struggling to improve our financials, to survive our financial situation. And Joe confirmed that the city has never gone below a AA rating, which is a very, very good rating. I think that there's several factors there. One is that we have the resources in terms of assessed real estate value to make good on our general obligation promises. But I think the bond rating agencies have also noted over time decisions that this body, and Fred, you and Sheila, along with I, have been involved in this to improve our financial practices, including creating the Financial Advisory Commission. So 2 points. One is we have always had a good credit rating. 2, I would caution credit rating does not say anything about our impending future budget situations. And we did have some discussion in passing at the FAC meeting about the structural deficit that we are facing. I think we can overcome that, but it is independent of what our bond rating is. Down the road, bond raters are always looking in the mirror and seeing where you've been and how you are. Down the road, if we don't get our budget situation in control, it could have an impact on our rating, but it's really not one of the big things. It's our ability to pay our bonds, and those have to get paid first. So in any event, that was the only other thing that I would report to you from the FAC meeting on this. At this point, I don't know. Yes, ma'am. Alderwoman Finlayson.
Just to add to what you're saying, I think one of the strengths of the city has been our ability to plan and to follow through on what we plan to do. Mm-hmm. Even in, was it 08 and 09, when we had a very difficult time, we put a plan in place and we worked our plan. Mm-hmm. And I think that was one of the benefits that the bonding agencies acknowledged, that we were planning ahead. Right. And as we're doing now.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I think we should give ourselves, kudos for planning, recognizing the problem, planning for it, and then following through.
You are absolutely correct. And Finance Director Dickinson made that comment as well, to the fact that we had problems, we addressed them, and we've moved through them, and we're in a much better place. I think at this point on the agenda, it is time for an update from the Finance Director, if there's anything new from our meeting on September 1st.
No, nothing in particular. We're working on the financial statements and doing the bond sale, and my Assistant Finance Director starts at the end of the month, so.
Good. Are there any questions from the committee or from Alderwoman Tierney? All right, at this point, I think our work is concluded. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there is. I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. Thank you.